whatever comes at you, the response is always, calm, composed, in control. We had the largest psychology department in Europe. It was let the action take place, and then feedback. Understand that the coach's voice is important. Whereas I was quite open with him that I wanted to spend my time with him understanding how I could evolve as a leader. It was like, you've obviously got this sort of coaching background. Now you're overseeing a sales team. Your mindset should be around that's your squad, that's your changing room. Just like in any football team, you've got.
Alex, I am buzzing to get stuck into this. I think I said to you before that I've got some questions that I really want to run through with you from your background, where you are now, and obviously the sport links to things as well. But the first question I've got for you, in terms of sport versus life, I've never been a professional athlete. I've never been a professional sports person. And what I want to know is it a different reality? It always feels like sports, men, women, athletes are living in a little bit of a different headspace and a different world to the rest of the world. So you've got an experience in that. So let's start with that question. Are they two different realities?
Great question. I suppose I've seen it from starting in that sporting side of things, seeing professional sports people in their day to day, and obviously trying to sort of, come into the business world and try and bring some of those traits over. So, interesting one. I think from a professional sports person, they've gone through life, I'd imagine, from quite a young age, pretty dedicated and pretty focused on what they want to achieve, where they want to get to in terms of competing professionally in their chosen sport. So I guess that leaves an element of single-mindedness, focus, ambition, that a mindset that lends itself to wanting to achieve something. So I think, from that perspective, they've been doing that since probably quite a young age, and have therefore accumulated a lot of years of striving for something. And I suppose if you look at myself, I was I was a sports person. I grew up playing football, playing tennis. I got into academy football in my teenage years and competed nationally in tennis. So I'd got to quite a good level by the age of sort of 13 or so. And then at that point, I sort of maybe didn't push on as much as I wanted to, and I ended up playing semi-professional football and coming out of tennis because I chose to focus on football and see how far I could get there. So I'd gone through that journey, and ultimately had gone in then into professional football from a coaching perspective. So I was then on the side of things where I was seeing professional footballers and how they went about their day to day. And I just think the lessons I've learned, I've had a level of ambition from competing through to wanting to be the best coach I could be, and that has transferred really well over into business. When I ended up moving away from football into the business world, I brought with me an element of, CPD. So wanting to go over and above and be the best at something, I needed to do more learning, more reading up on things to become an expert. That was just the mentality I brought over into business, and it served me well. I enjoy competition. So being in a sales environment where you're often up against other companies, other people vying for whether it's a new client, pitching for business, that competitive nature is just ingrained in me, and has definitely transferred over from just competing in sport from a very young age. So I definitely see there's a good link between the two, but from a sporting side of things, people are more likely to have built up years of, practice or honing that craft. Whereas from a business perspective, you will get people that naturally from a young age want to be entrepreneurs or be within business, but sometimes that may come later down the line, and they're then sort of playing catch up, but with that mindset potentially.
And I guess in professional sport, there was a moment where you said there you'd gone from tennis into football.
Mm.
There is a much higher ratio of people that fail at achieving that than succeeding. And what have you seen in your experience for the difference between the two, the percentage that managed to make a career out of tennis or football, but what's the difference between them and the people that haven't made it? Is it talent? Is it dedication? Is it a combination of the two? What's the big difference? Because I would imagine you've seen a lot of major kind of concerns for people where they've fallen away from their dream, and it's probably quite sad to watch. And there was obviously a moment where that happened for you as well, and you decided to leave professional football and go down the business route. So what's kind of, now you're a little bit older, wise and mature, what's the reflection on that you found?
Well, that's good question. There's quite a lot of layers to this, I'd say, because ultimately the difference between those that make it and those that don't quite make it, I think I've learned is a lot to do with the mindset. The fact that some people just want it a bit more. Some people can perform under pressure and others can't. There is definitely, for me, mindset is probably the biggest thing that separates the ones that do make it and those that don't. But again, alongside that, certainly if we look at a football environment, there's other things that will prevent someone from making it. Something like an injury. An injury, causes, done at the wrong time. Let's say they're going for a scholarship and they get injured. They don't get that playing time to prove themselves. And from a club perspective, they have to decide who they're taking into the next round of or give a scholarship to. You've got things like, environment, support, things like that, where people don't have the support of getting to training. It just so happens that they can't, get there enough to sort of be able to commit fully to what it takes. So there's loads of layers to why people don't make it. But I think if it's a level playing field and you've got two people striving for the same goal and there's not much in it, they're both great at what they do because they're in that environment. I think mindset, application, attitude, commitment, those are the things that will push one person above the other and get them to sort of become professional and an expert in that field. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I've always said that 1+1 =2, which equals 3. And
Yeah.
to get to that elite moment, to get to the medal, the trophy, the prize, the career, you've got to have some talent. You've got to have the dedication. You put the two together and you get the 3, you get the success. And that's the way I've kind of looked at things.
And I think it's always quite interesting because, I listen to a lot of high performers on podcasts and things like that. So the ones that generally push on and make it, they might not have been the best player at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, or even later than that. They're often good. They're in the upper echelon of that group. But actually they're always striving for something more. They've got someone to track down, and actually the people that might be the most talented, the ones that have always been talked up as the next big thing, they sort of, the only way they can go is down, really, and they maybe get a little bit, they think that they've already made it, and actually their intensity levels drop off and their focus drops off, and they're almost acting as if they are in that position of earning the thousands, the hundreds of £1,000s a week that people can go on and get. So, actually that's quite an interesting dynamic as well when you see that play out, because I know people that were head and shoulders the best players in their age groups from sort of 7 years old through to 14, but actually, when push comes to shove, they start believing the hype, and it's a quick fall from grace at that point.
Interesting one, Rob, because peak is something that we're all striving for, our own version of peak, but it is a fine line, isn't it, that can go one of two different directions. And your outlook on things, Rob, and your experiences and the way that you coach and support people, I guess you see the danger zone of that kind of getting to that line and not actually achieving it, or not actually achieving the version that you were expecting to achieve.
Yeah, 100%. I was only just chatting to a client yesterday about it. Like, the expectations and what the outcome was different to actually the reality. And I think, like you've probably seen it, Alex, a lot of people, that's where that commitment can sometimes start to trail off if you keep coming against the obstacles and not getting you to where you think you're going. Like, it's quite interesting. So from that transition into tennis into semi-professional football and then into coaching, Like what was that category age-wise? Like when did you actually come up with like a coach in, and what sort of people did you coach in that period of time?
So I played semi-professional football from 18 until 22.
Yeah.
So I went to university, played in the I think it was the second team at the time at Leeds Metropolitan, and I came back and effectively, my passion was sport. Like
Mm.
I loved football, and like most people, if you're not able to play it, can you be involved in it? So I was fortunate enough to get accepted into what was essentially a gap year program with Arsenal Football Club. And as part of that, I did some coaching in the community. I got my first two coaching badges, the FA Level 1 and Level 2, and I went and coached in Egypt as well at one of their international soccer schools for 3 months. So I got a great experience, but also some key things on my CV.
Mm.
And then quite soon after that, I went and did my UEFA B qualification. So I became a UEFA qualified coach and was obviously looking for full-time employment in football. But up until that point was just doing a lot of different jobs in schools and then as part of sort of centre of excellences or academies in the evening. So I was at Watford for a period of time. And then I went to Wycombe Wanderers, and just through hard work and doing all the hours I could, they offered me full-time employment when I was probably 23 and a half. And yeah, so I was full-time in football for approximately 2 years and loved it. Was doing sort of 70 to 80 hours a week. If I wasn't coaching, I was shadowing, learning from just unbelievable people at the time. And unfortunately, the first team got relegated. So they got relegated from League One into League Two. And at that point, the Supporters Trust was in ownership of the company or the club, and decided the best thing to do was to get rid of the lifeblood of the club, the source of all the potential talent and the money they could accrue later down the line. So they got rid of the academy, therefore making all of the staff and the kids redundant on the spot. So at that point, I was, there was someone that a parent of one of the kids I was coaching in the under 7 age group that was in business. He ran a company that dealt in the conveyancing space, and he just said to me, "Look, I think just watching you coach, I think you got passion. I think you're personable. I think there's a job there for you if you want to come and work with me while you just sort of have a look around, see if there's any other clubs you want to go to." And I went and did that. I appreciated the opportunity, and you know, football, unless you're in the Premier League elite level, doesn't pay very well.
Mm.
So as much as I was doing 70 to 80 hours a week, I was on around 16, 17 grand a year. I was slugging my guts out, and suddenly I was without, a job. And I went in at a similar level in this company, but within 9 months, I've been promoted 3 times. I was a business development manager quite quickly, and don't know, at that point, I was due to get married. I had other commitments, and for me, it just became about, look, I'm interacting with people. I've got targets, so naturally, I'm going to find a way to hit them. And I just learned the fact that I could enjoy what I was doing, and it didn't have to be linked to football. Fact of the matter was, I was dealing with mortgage brokers, estate agents, different people like that who all liked sport, and I could just use that as a way to build rapport and have enjoyable conversations while selling them something.
What's the for you? What was the biggest win in that kind of moment of climbing the ladder? You mentioned about the promotions. Was it that you've got that natural competitive edge that would have come from professional sport, or the fact that someone spotted that you had clearly personal skills, personality skills and relatability skills that meant you could quickly link and make people feel comfortable? I would have thought. I'm always fascinated in the sales world. Which of those two do you think served you best in that sort of ladder that you climbed?
I think it was really interesting looking back at when you're in I was coaching in an academy. You're on a pitch with kids everywhere, parents watching on the sideline, other coaches walking around. you're having to project yourself, you're having to plan for sessions, you're having to understand what people are going to get out of that session. So what's the goal that you want people to achieve from the 2 hour session you're going to put on? You're having to then deal with relationships, with the kids and how to progress them and make sure that they've got everything they need, but then also the parents who come with a different set of challenges. Some are great, but others are always knocking on your door or asking for 10 minutes after training to ask why their kid only got sort of 40 minutes at the weekend and things like that. So the dynamics you're always having to play to, it makes you quite adaptable. And I think in an environment like that, whatever comes at you, the response is always, calm, composed, in control. And I think, for me going into a business environment, first of all, it was lovely the fact that someone was able to look at me on a sporting field and say, well, actually, I think you could do quite well at this. It gave me, it was a nice feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But then just sort of understanding that actually a lot of what I was doing, if I can go and just, look, I get the knowledge, of course. It was completely alien to me, the conveyancing world and what that entailed, but I knew I'd be able to learn it because I'd be committed to it. Once I had the knowledge, it was all around, okay, who do I need to get on with? Who's important? Who? I suppose, how do I project myself? Body language. How can I challenge myself? If there's an opportunity to present, I'm going to be the one that says yes rather than like hope it's never going to be my turn. So it just became a nice challenge. I really enjoyed the fact that it was something different. It was something new. It was something out of my comfort zone. And actually, it was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly. Let's go and be the best at it. I want your job in 12 months time.
It does actually sound, I'm saying it does actually sound like when you said dealing with kids and parents and then moving into the business world of dealing with estate agents and conveyancers, it sounded like you had already prepped yourself ready for those conversations with dealing with different groups of people, different types of hats on different types of heads, different ways of communicating amongst people. So
Obviously, it was huge. And I think, a really important point to make, especially in the environment that we've created with the, Project Peak Performance, is at Wycombe Wanderers, we had the largest psychology department in Europe. So we were suddenly we were going to be operating in League Two. A League Two football club had the largest psychology department in all of Europe. And essentially we had, the head of academy, a guy called Richard Dobson, absolutely fantastic guy, and he's now the assistant manager at Queen's Park Rangers. He had effectively brought in a psychologist called Misha Jervis, who brought then along people at Brunel University, students, people that were doing psychology degrees, and we had 9 people on the pitch with us, working with different departments, wow, taking kids to the side, and if they missed a shot in training and we're about to get frustrated, pulling them off, talking about how you're feeling, trying to get them to deal with those emotions, and doing workshops with the parents and things like that, and workshops with the coaches. So for me, that was like, I've grown more and more to understand mindset and the power it plays. But at the time, I just enjoyed learning about something new and that extra marginal gain that you could get on someone else if you were actually to take note and really immerse yourself in that opportunity. So, that was a really good point to make, I think, given what we're doing and a lot of how we talk around peak performance and how much mind is important in that.
Are there any key takeaways from working with like that level of elite kind of sports psychologists? Is there any like actual techniques? Those moments you talk about sound amazing, but is there any kind of techniques that have become like little meta habits for you that you use day to day?
Good question. And I think the majority of the work was done with the kids and the parents, because it was all around the environment, with the parents especially, getting them to understand that the coach's voice is important, and a child's attention span, if they get too confused, they're not going to execute. So a child is more likely to either seek out their parent or to listen to them because of the role they play in their life. So it was trying to get parents to understand that, when they're playing, it's time for them to execute what they're being taught. They need a clear head, so we know the decisions are their decisions. And for me, from that point in that coaching environment, and even now with my children, I just enjoy having that clarity that as much as I can get excited and disappointed in equal measure, like I'm never going to project that, and I'm just going to enjoy the fact for that period of time. My kids are on their own, and let's see how they get on. So that was an important learning that I've taken into later life. I think in sport, certainly professional football, I keep mentioning it because I spent the most time in that sport. The coaching badges that I grew up with were very much around spot something that you think is going to happen, stop the play while someone's got the ball and you think they're going to make a wrong decision, and give them feedback before they've made their decision or executed. Whereas a lot of what they did was let the action take place and then feedback either in a break or take someone to the side and just say, what you did there, what were you thinking, and let them explain, because actually a lot of the time a 7-year-old's feedback is completely different to what you perceive they were thinking. So a lot of let them play and then deal with the feedback, rather than like just be intent on just stopping them to make a point and make yourself look good. I think that was a really key learning.
Rob, we're in digital marketing, and in digital marketing, something that's been really clear, and it's funny that you relate that to talking to a 7-year-old from an elite psychologist. What I took from that is single voice, simple message, and that's how kids kind of can understand things, and it affects them. When you look at digital marketing in this day and age as well, there's so much noise, there's so much like attention searching, but it always comes back to, whenever you deal with anyone at an elite level in digital marketing, keep message simple and keep a single goal in mind. Don't try and confuse people with too much message and too many goals. And Rob, for us in digital marketing, it's quite interesting to hear that from a 7-year-old's point of view. Obviously, when we're in different ways, but we're effectively talking to adults through digital marketing. That I find quite interesting. Actually, it sinks in quite nicely. Go on, Alex.
So I just, my mind's whirring as we're talking, but just the link between sport and business just came to me in the fact that for the last 18 months to 2 years, I've seen a sort of human behavior and leadership coach. I see them once a week. It's been fantastic for me. But one of the key things that he said to me early on our sessions was like, you've obviously got this sort of coaching background. Now you're overseeing a sales team. Your mindset should be around that's your squad, that's your changing room. Just like in any football team, you've got a number 10, a holding midfielder that's strong in the tackle, a goalkeeper, different positions, different skill sets. Look at your team as the dressing room. Who needs an arm over their shoulder, who needs a different kind of direction, who needs to be told exactly what they're expected to do and what they need to do, and who else needs to be like given the end goal but go and find their own way there. And I, for me, that was one of the most valuable things anyone has said to me, because it immediately just made me visualize that sport domain and look at the individuals as sort of, I suppose, players in a similar way that a manager would with their football team. It made me dig into the detail of each individual and spend a lot of time understanding them more, their needs, their motivations, etc., etc. So, yeah, another good link.
No, I think Ian mentioned this before. Like, Ian said that he sees his team or his group as like a set of Marine commanders. And I do think that there is a correlation. Like our company, we see ourselves as a bunch of pirates ship going through things. So I do think that there is that like a vision element to it, because then it creates that inclusion amongst it all. And especially with you're thinking, okay, how do I transport what I learnt before in the past without getting lost? And thinking, okay, well, yeah, I'm running a team. It is a team. This room is my dressing room. This is like, we're going to go out on match day on these particular days. Like this is the plan. These are the strategies we're looking to achieve.
Yeah.
So
with you, Rob, you spoke about pirates and Ian Marine Commanders. Is that something you project to the team? Is that an identity that they all link with?
yeah, I mean, purely down to the fact that even our drink of our choice is a bottle of rum whenever we go into technological like development. So, and we actually have, I think, openly put it out to the market, going back to what Ian was saying, like keeping the message simple. Like, yeah, we are a bunch of pirates, but that's the way we are. But I remember Ian saying like how his partners established is the Marines mindset of like, you look to your left and you look to your right, and you know that person's going to be equally as strong with you, and then you move forward as one unit. So having that whole football team part to it, I think, from what I noticed from what you were saying originally, what you said about the key element and the difference in types of coaching and types of leadership, like, you know, that transformation, what you probably in the last 18 months, been the last probably few years, which we've seen with it, more leadership needs to have that. I'm not just going to be directive and tell you what to do and you're just going to follow me. It's like, no, like I need you to work out and coach it, and then get you to understand what you're going to do differently and how the outcome will change, rather than me continually saying the same thing and the outcome still being the same. And then they're looking back at you as a leader going, what's happening? You're like, I don't know. So it sounds like a really great way in the last 18 months of having that. Like, what made you bring the coach in originally? Like, if you've got that background, what made you then go, actually, I probably need a little bit more development there?
There's someone sort of, a close friend who was seeing a coach, and basically we got talking about it, and he recommended this person. So I'd sort of been quite keen to have someone that I could speak to, that wasn't necessarily linked to the business I operate with, just sort of, but for him, the coach, he's generally working with people that might have things they need to resolve, or like, he helps them get over certain barriers to their potential. Whereas I was quite open with him that I wanted to spend my time with him understanding how I could evolve as a leader, because essentially I'd gone from, coaching kids, so there was an element of leadership, but when you're working with adults, it's slightly different. To then being a single-minded salesperson focused on myself, to then becoming a sales director and having a team. So I didn't have like loads of experience in how to manage people and teams. So I really wanted to have, someone that had been a leader. He's held a number of senior positions in the sales world as well, to just sort of bounce ideas off. And the great thing was that, it wasn't a case of him, he's never been someone to say, you should do this, or you would, I would advise you to do this. It's more, he coaches out the answer from me, or gives me the chance to say, okay, this has happened. What's your instinct telling you? How would you deal with that? And often my gut instinct is right. I'd say probably 80 to 90% of the time. But he gives me the platform to have that opportunity to make the decision, rather than just tell me what to do and then I don't really learn. So the reason I got a coach was just to try and see how can I, become better at what I do, and just have someone that I could speak to very openly about some of the things that were happening, situations, and just myself. How do I become better? How do I, learn more? What it's been one of the, if not the best things I've ever done. Over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, it's been fantastic.
I find coaching very interesting, and I like to look at it outside the box a little bit, from almost looking at it being involved in it, either as a coach or someone being coached. But I try and then also step away a little bit and look outside. And I find what you said there, good coaches are able to help someone coach them to the decision, coach them to their own answer, rather than giving them an answer, because that's more an education, I guess, than a coaching program. And I find that senior figures, and I don't know if this is something that you're experiencing at the moment, Alex, but senior figures are normally very decisive and very good at making decisions. And the whole learning process of getting to that leadership role, getting to that senior role, is all around fine tuning and perfecting the art of solution finding, and also decision making. When you're in the role that you're in at the moment, is there kind of moments where you think, wow, I've really like speed tracked to that decision there? It was a level of kind of peak decision making, if you like, but that probably wouldn't happen without all of the experience you've gone through with coaching, with sports psychology, with elite sports that you've been dealing with. Is there kind of one key moment that stands out where you think, if I hadn't made that decision, that result would not have come into action, be it in sport or be it in business?
Yeah, great question. I think over time I've very much learned through just the time with the coach and just through how different scenarios have played out in business, just to just trust my gut, because 90% of the time it's, if not more, it's right. My gut instinct, as soon as that has kicked in, even if I've waited for something to play out or procrastinated slightly over a decision, it's ended up just turning out to be what I thought it was at the start, whether that's certain staff members just getting a feeling they're not doing what they say they're doing, or they're not as committed as you hope they'd be. It tended to play out the way that my gut had kicked in earlier on in the process.
Give me a moment, Alex. Give me one thing. Give me one moment.
I think one moment. I mean, we were that. I suppose the way that we started working with one of the largest business in the UK in the sector that we operate with in 7.5 years ago. And first of all, I just decided to message directly. I found an email address. I decided to message directly when we were effectively 4 months into being a startup, that we wanted to do business. They opened to a meeting, and then I heard back from the wife of the owner, sort of saying they're interested to have a chat. So was quite impulsive in just, let's go for it. We're 4 months in, but actually we can do this. Let's make that decision to sort of try and win that business. And then there was another company where someone told me to come in at 9 a.m. for a meeting, and effectively I turned up at 8:30 and was still sat there, still knowing that they were in the building, until 6 p.m. I stayed sitting there until I saw them come out of the office with their coat over their shoulder, and they just walked past me and just said, come on in, Alex, down the pub." And basically, I think that was a test from their perspective. But I was like, there's no way I'm blinking first here. I'm going to stay here because I know you're in here, and we're going to go out of here together, and I'm going to get an answer either way. So went down the pub, pitched over a pint, got the business. And I think, again, that was just another sign of, a mentality of, okay, they're committed. That's a person I want to work with. That's my reading of it from the other side.
Love that. Commitment and discipline to stick around and just wait and see what happens sometimes is an amazing thing.
And I think it comes down, sorry, Ian, I think it just comes down to just that belief of, you can't, one of my favorite sayings is control the controllables, but you can't control someone's reaction, what they say, but the decision is, what are you going to do in that moment, or how are you going to react? And it was like, well, I can control sitting here and making it really uncomfortable. So let's do it.
Love it. No, I like that. So if you're on holiday and you're in a lift and the person says, "Nice to meet you. What do you do? Who are you?" What's your kind of 30-second summary of Alex today?
Today is the key point on that, because I'm sure even a couple of years ago it would have been a mumbled version of what I do and not really that coherent. But I suppose today I would say, I'm a proud husband and father of 3. I'm a sales professional in a leadership position. I'm a life learner with a fascination around the brain and its impact on human performance. And I am a chief sales officer at Go2 Group. So that was, I suppose, my elevator pitch.
And who do you want to be? What's the things you're working on in the background for you? Who do you want to be next? What's the next Alex? If we ask again in 2 years' time, what do you say then?
Great question again. I mean, for me, I've not necessarily got any um, definitive roles or goals, if you know what I mean, in terms of this position by this age and things like that. For me, I've hit the position professionally that I want to be in. I'd set out, by the time I was 40, I wanted to be sort of in the C-suite position, and I'm in that already. Um, for me, I'm committed now to understanding psychology and human performance better. And that's going to involve understanding more of the clinical stuff, the facts behind the feelings, and just really committing to that learning experience, because I think that will only positively impact what happens at home and how I interact with my wife, my kids, but also from a work perspective in terms of managing the team, working with the board, understanding people and human behavior. I just want to become an expert in that field.
Good driver. It's a good driver there. In terms of, you were training 7-year-olds, obviously other age brackets as well. Now you're potentially training, coaching, supporting 27-year-olds. But I think there's a point at 16, 17 in someone's life where there isn't enough advice for people that are in your position in business, and obviously the experiences you've had. You said before you'd moved to Egypt and coach people. It's a different country standards at sort of experiencing things like Arsenal Football Club, all of that aspect of things. So those 16, 17-year-olds that maybe they don't have a mentor, they've got teachers at school, they've got parents, and then their biggest influence is probably their mates. And I think there's a place where there's not enough advice for those people that are about to enter careers, and they could really do with some foundations laying out. So what advice would you give to that group of people to lay some foundations? Is there any kind of mindset statements you've got, techniques that you operate on, or just general advice that you would give to, if it was you at 17, what advice would you give?
I think probably the best advice I've received is through the form of a quote, but I think it does link into a feeling, which is attitude dictates your altitude. And I think if you are, if you can be a positive person, ultimately someone that lights up the room when you walk in rather than when you walk out, I think that's going to be, that's going to serve you well in life. And it's not all, I'd say the vast majority of people when they're 17 years old probably don't know where they want to go or what they're going to end up specializing in. But what you have to be is someone that, people are drawn to you. People are, they feel good around you. And through that, it will just open up opportunities. Talk to people, put yourself out there. If there's a challenge or there's something that gets offered to you, say yes and learn while doing. Don't shut yourself off away from it just because you think, oh, maybe it's a bit above your head. Challenge yourself, go and see what it's about. Open yourself up to those opportunities and do everything with positivity and a smile. And I just think the people that are that way will generally, get somewhere pretty good.
Yeah, it's a great bit of advice. Rob, you're an elite coach yourself, elite performance coach, and that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, isn't it? The confidence to say yes, the confidence to find it, or sometimes imposter syndrome as well. They think, no, I couldn't do that, even though the opportunity is right there and they've worked bloody hard to get that opportunity. But they say no. I mean, I for context, I speak to estate agents all the time about starting their own business, and some of the conversations I have with people, I just think you're going to be amazing at this. And lastminute.com, they bottle it, and it is a bottle. It's a straight up Tottenham Hotspur bottle job. I don't know if I can say that on this podcast, but I know you're an Arsenal fan.
I'll advocate it,
yeah. And I see that time and time again. But Rob, that's something that probably I would imagine you talk to a lot of people about, is taking advantage of that opportunity rather than not taking advantage about it.
Yeah, I think I call it having an explorer's mindset. Like if you explore every single opportunity. I only interviewed someone on a podcast on another sort of channel, and she was saying exactly the same thing. I just said yes to everything. And then I think if you looked at it and going, if if you go through a process, I always say to clients, if you go through a process and the outcome is not what you achieved, you've still taken one step forward into a new version of yourself, going through that process and learning from it. So you're either growing or learning. There's never such any part of failing. So if you're saying yes to something, as long as you're saying yes to the journey and the experience and what that will bring you, whether that is the result you want or not the result. But we all know, like you've experienced, Alex, we all know, like you've gone through that journey. You went to like, coaching profession, and then it closed down. Like if someone said to you, you're going to be doing this and we're going to close in a few years down the line, you probably would have said no to it. But the fact you went yes into that role, that's where all that stuff you've learned from to actually get you where you are today and all the experiences you've had. So I always say yes is yes to explore and yes to learn, like, and then see where that journey goes off the back of it.
And with that, Rob, people that might be naturally, or they've evolved into someone that's naturally fixed minded.
Yeah.
They see the problems rather than the opportunity. Do you think that they can switch into a growth minded person, to suddenly, they might say yes to an opportunity, but once they're in that opportunity, do they suddenly step back and go back to their natural state? I'm fascinated in how someone can switch. Can they switch into a growth minded person, and can they naturally then evolve and continue to be that person over the long term?
I think good question. I think switch always comes with some major impact of requirements of change. So whether that business has got to the point where it's going into administration and you need to change, or your back's against the wall, you need to change. I think you're right in what you're saying. You can't just switch from a fixed term to a growth term mindset, because there's something deeper rooted inside. Ian was saying about imposter syndrome. Those mindsets are usually fixed on like the kids that you probably taught when they were 7 years old at football, and like your impact as a coach and what you said to them and how they were taught. Those are the sort of things that you take through your adulthood years, and that will affect your psychology of, like you said, your mindset of striving for the best. So not saying yes to something because you think, oh, I'm going to fail, because my dad told me once that, don't ever fail, son, like losing, etc. Like those are things that are going to impact you. So I think there has to be some, Ian is a great example of this. It has to be some element of like, I'm going to take this route and I'm going to wear my pink hoodies and I'm going to rip up the rule book of a state agency. So there has to be some fixed delusional mindset to pursue something that you genuinely believe in. Otherwise, you just become vanilla. But there has to be an element of another layer to that, going, okay, there's going to be a delusion, but I need a leadership team, or I need someone around me, like a coach or another business partner who's different to me, who will challenge me on my thought process and why I think that way, and ultimately get me to evolve as a new version of myself and a better leader.
I think fear and ego normally play a yin and yang approach to inevitably where you are and where you're
going. Yeah, and shaming as well. Shame's a huge one.
Yeah, which I guess you could throw in fear bracket, is kind of the fear of shame, the fear of love, someone walking away from you, the fear of the failure. I think they always make a big decision, and then ego has an element to it as well. So, it's always interesting to see, why did someone do that? And I always look at it and go, was it fear or was it ego? When you transitioned from sports into business, there was a moment where you had an opportunity and you said yes to it. There was probably something in there that was playing around ego, playing around fear. So I've got 3 quick fire questions for you, Alex, and I want to know the answer to all 3. So I want you to just think about, when was a moment that you had a real peak feeling, like a real feeling of like, I'm in a really good zone right now, and then a peak moment where you had an absolute peak. It could be performance, or it could just be a trigger moment in your life where you're like, I feel I am at the top of this particular mountain at this moment. And then what's a peak fear? What's something that, scares the crap out of you?
Okay.
I don't necessarily mean I'm scared of spiders, but, what's a thing that you're really scared of in general in life that kind of strives you and drives you forward? So feeling, moment, and fear. Hit me.
So just if we go one question at a time, first question, and then I'll answer that one.
Peak feeling.
Peak feeling. I spoke at a national estate agency conference in December last year. I was the speaker before Jamil Qureshi, who, for anyone knows, is an unbelievable TEDx speaker. So he was following me. But it was about 500 people there, and I just felt this complete sense of clarity. I was in total control, and therefore it allowed me to project, talk without any cues. And, it was only probably 15 minutes, but, feedback afterwards was amazing. And when you just feel like something went well, it was good to have that back up afterwards. I felt buzzing for weeks and weeks after that.
Nice. It's always good. And what about outside of profession? Same question. Peak feeling in your personal life, family life, fitness life, a moment there.
Okay.
Your wife could watch this, by the way.
As I say, I thought he was going to say, which child is he going to pick?
Right, so peak moment.
Peak feeling.
Peak feeling.
In family life, personal life. What's that one moment where you just felt top of the world that day from a personal life perspective?
I've taken a lot of time to try and understand how to best communicate with my kids. To, like anyone, you can get frustrated, but don't get it should be more around, as much of it as positive as possible, and why they should do something for the right reasons, rather than like, don't do that. So I've spent a lot of time how to best communicate with my kids, and it's all been knitting together very nicely over the last sort of 3 months or so, and it's had a massive impact on, how they're feeling, and I can just see the confidence they've got as 3 little kids. But each of my youngest 18 months old is not really talking too much at the moment, but both of the boys separately in the last 4 weeks have told me I'm the best dad ever, and both have said that that they love their dad, and for me, no matter what, professionally, anything for myself that I'm gym wise, exercise wise, I don't think anything competes with that feeling. So that for me was the best thing I felt, best thing over the last, forever.
we're all dads on here, so
yeah.
I think that's a moment. Yeah, I kind of, the moment where the little ones just come over, give you a cuddle on the sofa is always a peak feeling. What about moments, business or professional or personal, sorry, but just one moment in life where you were like, Jesus, I feel good today?
It's hard to it's hard to narrow them down, but it's not the case. I'm trying to think of one. There's definitely been plenty, but I think there was a Tuesday, on Tuesdays I have a personal training session in the morning. I see my coach later in the morning, and then if it falls on the first of the month, I have my sales team meeting. And for me, on a Tuesday, having gone from exercising to then having my brain worked on to then presenting the annual results, last month, and showing how well the company had done, that day for me was like ticking so many boxes that endorphins were flying around on the way home. So that was a great day, but it was accumulation of just good things happening.
Sometimes is multi layers of success in different areas can just trigger you into like the ultimate kind of day and just feeling awesome. I think Joe Rogan on his podcast says you earned your sofa. So you earned the right to sit on the sofa that night. And I always think about that when I put my ass on the sofa. I think, did I earn this moment today? Like, have I done enough today to truly warrant sitting down and actually just putting the phone upside down and switching off? And I think that's one of those moments where you think, I really earned my sofa today.
And I think just from a single moment, probably, just the feeling I had when we went as a family to Dubai, 2020 it was. just having worked all year to generate a level of bonus that could allow for us to go and have an amazing holiday in Dubai. That moment of sitting on the beach next to my wife, both of us looking out at the kids, the two boys at the time playing in the sea. That's like a distilled moment where I wish I could have that every day.
Yeah, love that. And then what about fear? What's the number one, like in life, general kind of, is there one thing that you're like, I can't handle that. Like, I don't want that to ever happen. I don't want that to be the case. What's the peak fear for Alex?
I physically fear failure. It's a big one for me, that, because I'm a competitive individual, and I always have done. I enjoy winning. I love winning, whatever it may be at. And I've done an exercise recently around belief, and ultimately to get to pure belief, you have to look at your limiting beliefs first. And it led me to realize that I find it really hard to see a positive from failure, or see failure as a learning step. And I know just from hearing such high performers and, anyone, the pack that we've built, that actually the greatest successes can come from the biggest failures. But I just, it's always been a blocker for me, just to sort of try and understand that. And I've made strides in that over the last few weeks. But, I suppose with that, you would seek out little bits of failure, things that could have gone better, things that could have been improved, to try and get used to that habit of seeing it. And that's the journey I'm on at the moment, just in the day to day, just something small that might not have gone the way you wanted, something you might have said that could have been said better, and trying to seek those out to try and get my head around how to process it and what can I learn from it.
I think there's a lot of people that will probably relate to that. Rob, any final questions from you, or kind of summary on Alex's conversation with us for the almost an hour, actually, the last 50 odd minutes?
Last one for me. You've quoted quite a few people in the past when we've had our group chats on a Friday, of different people you've come in, different sporting people, and it seems almost like a passion of yours to explore those mindset journeys of people and what they went through. So, like, who would you say is like your ultimate GOAT of a person out there you've come across, so you think peak performance, like they didn't start off where they needed to start, and I really enjoyed like learning about their journey and actually like what they got? Like, who would be that individual that you look up to, or you'd like to probably interview one day?
So the GOAT of all GOATs for me is Lionel Messi. I've just, for me, he transcends just elite performance. He's just an artist when he's on the pitch. But having grown up, he was deemed too small. He had to have injections, to sort of try and escalate his growth. And he's dealt with adversity coming from the environment he grew up in, and having to prove himself through the Barcelona academy. But for me, it's just like, I would pay whatever it takes to just see him play. So he's the GOAT of all GOATs for me, and that was for me, it was an amazing moment just to see him win the World Cup in December, and just sort of tick that off, because that was always a question mark over him from a national scale. But I ran an exercise. I run a sort of elite training program for my team at work, and as an exercise, I looked at 16 people that I termed in the elite category, the best of the best, the top 1 to 2% in their sector. And I dug down into articles, documentaries, and I put in words that were used about them, and then created a Venn diagram of linking words between all of them. And there were about 8 to 10, but the ones that stood out for me were belief, commitment, self-awareness, and adaptability. That was used and commonplace across all of them. And having looked into those 16 personalities, the person I'd probably most like to interview with the most fascinating mindset out of the lot was Michael Jordan. And there's obviously the Last Dance documentary, which I'm probably third or fourth time watching now. But if you want to see someone that is just a little bit different, I think it shows to get to the top of the top in a very competitive industry, he was willing to do things others weren't willing to do. And he was able to bring people's levels up around him, who, if they didn't have him there, wouldn't have been able to reach that performance level. I just think his mentality is, you just have to look into him to understand how high performing he was.
Next level in terms of, he actually defines a bit of a motto that I love to live by and have done for quite a few years now, definitely since my mid-20s, which is, today I'm going to do what other people's won't, so tomorrow I can do what other people can't. And I think he pretty much, sums that up in a nutshell. I think it's an awesome way to kind of wrap up the episode, Alex. And I've been looking forward to having this and putting some questions at you. I know I mentioned that before, but you haven't disappointed in terms of, the answers that have come from the experiences you've had. I've learned a lot on this particular episode. So yeah, Alex and Rob, thank you very much for obviously being a big part of this episode. It's been awesome. Project Peak Performance episode. And if anyone's got questions for Alex, I think you're pretty active on LinkedIn, is probably a go-to place for you to go. Excuse the pun.
Yeah, I see you there. Go to.
You like that?
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the questions and just, the podcast episode. Really enjoyed it. So thank you, both of you.
Thanks,
Cheers,
mate.
Alex.